Hi again everybody, welcome to my latest video. Well, in this one I'm going to update this disk space on this high-end AMD PC that I recently built. I made a whole series about it. Right now it has a 512 gigabyte M.2 form factor SSD. This is a 1 terabyte version of an M.2 SSD. They're from different manufacturers, but I compared the specs and they look very similar, so I don't expect to see much performance difference at all. However, you never know. When you're putting in a disk that has less space used on it, that could change it one way or the other. So we'll find that out. So I'm going to actually put this on the motherboard. This particular 570 motherboard has on it a second M.2 slot right underneath the AIO pump. And it doesn't have a heatsink on it, which is okay for purposes of just copying across. I'm not going to actually run it there other than to copy from it. And then once I have that working, I'm going to reboot it through the BIOS and make sure it does boot to this drive. Once that's done, I will then take that drive and actually move it over to the primary spot for M.2 slots, which is underneath a motherboard heatsink that is provided by the manufacturer. And then we'll do some performance tests of it after that. Primarily crystal disk mark, to be honest with you. So if you get something out of this video that you find useful or helpful in any way, I'd really appreciate it if you consider subscribing to my channel. Then you could actually also be notified whenever there's future builds, including entire PC builds that I have coming up, a couple of them, and you'll be able to catch up with those and see how I do it. So without any further ado, let me get started with this. Okay, I have it opened up on my desk here. The actual spot is right here, back over here. Here's where the screw is already in place. I made sure when I built this to put the screw there so I wouldn't lose it. So the first thing I have to do is take that little screw out. Got my little magnetic screwdriver here, and I'll go in, take that screw out. That's what's nice about a magnetic screwdriver. There it is, held on. Then I will take the new M.2 and I will put it in place. 45-degree tilt into the socket. Give it a little bit of a wiggle to get the lands all in place over here, right? And then I push down a little bit, make sure the screw is ready on the screwdriver. Then push down on it, put the screw in right there, screw it in place. Like I said, if I was going to leave this in place, I would put a heatsink on that. But for purposes of just copying it over, actually copying from this one on this end over here, right, here's the one that's using the motherboard's heatsink. I'm going to copy from that one over to that one. Okay, let me go to that step. Okay, I decided to bring it right into the BIOS to see if we see the second drive. And sure enough, if you look right here in the center under storage information, it shows that we now have two NVMe drives. We have the original one as M.2 under 2, and that's a 512.1 gigabyte. And we have the brand new one, which is this PCIe SSD 1024.2 gigabyte. That's the 1 terabyte one. So I guess at this point, what I will do is I will bring up Acronis and do the clone. Okay, so I'm going to put the USB stick in the first USB here. It happens to be 3.0, but that doesn't matter. Get that in here. So now with the USB stick in, I rebooted and went back into the BIOS. And I want to force a boot from the USB. I got a menu came up, so I'm going to click on the USB, the 8 gigabyte USB, and hit enter. It looks like it's starting Acronis. I want to go and pick choice number 1, Acronis True Image, 64-bit, and I now see it loading the USB. This actually runs a version of Linux to do this. Okay, here we are in Acronis. So let me now go ahead and pick the tools and utilities. And I want to do a clone disk. I want it to automatically deal with the partitions. I don't want to be manually playing with this. That's what that question means. So I'm going to say next to that. And these are all the disks that it sees. So it wants right now is the source hard drive. The source is this 476.9. That's after being formatted, the A data. So that's disk number 4. Going to click on that. Go next. Now it sees a disk 3. It didn't show that before. So now it sees the non-initialized. Got to be careful here because at a disk 1, which is a Western Digital 2.5-inch drive, serial ATA, it wasn't NVMe. So the interface type is important to notice here. So this is going to be my destination, disk 3. And I'm going to click next. Let's double check to make sure if it makes sense. We're going from disk 4 to disk 3. This is what it shows what the disk 3 will look like. Right now it's blank. This is what it will look like once it's completely been copied over. This disk will be restored as is. This layout will remain a GPT format, okay? That's the right one. Proceed. It's now copying between the two M.2 drives. Well, it's done, and that only took, I was timing it separately, that only took 4 minutes, even though it originally said it was longer, like 7 minutes. So we're good here. I can say okay, and then I can go back and reboot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the BIOS and force a boot from the larger M2 first to see if that works. Okay, back in the BIOS, and now I see appearing on the screen a new choice, the cloned version. It says Windows Boot Clone Manager. Let me go ahead and hit F8. Now I got an additional choice on the menu here. Windows Boot Manager Clone, the 1024.2 gigabyte. I'll arrow down to it and I'll hit enter. Okay, now that I've done that, let me see what the disk looks like. I'm back in the Windows desktop. Open up this computer. What do we got? Local disk C. It says we have 763 gigabytes free. That's great. And look what it did to the other NVMe. It made that local disk E, and it shows it has about half free. So I was able to force the boot and make that drive the C drive, and it looks good. Now let me go physically switch to drives and double check everything. Okay, now we're gonna take out one drive and swap the other one into the primary position. This is one we just loaded right here. So we're going to take this and move it, take the single screw out. I didn't over tighten it, so it should come out pretty easily. Got the screw. Take this drive out. We're not going to use this socket again. And then I've got to go to the other side, and over here I've got to take this one out. Now this one has the heatsink that came with the motherboard right here. So I got to use that again. But I have two screws. I got to screw off of the end of that one first. And I'm going to put it back over here so we don't lose it. That way if I ever need it again, it's right there. I don't have to go look for it anywhere. Won't over tighten it, just snug right there. And I'll take this heatsink off. Now there's a thermal pad underneath here, so I have to make sure I retain that. I don't want to lose it. There's two screws that hold this down. They're longer than the other screws. There they are, okay. And there's one on the other side. Hard to tell in all the black, but it's there. And I feel that that one's a trapped screw right there. So I feel it resistance from the thermal pad. You got to give it a little bit of twist side to side to get it up. And then there's the thermal pad. I will just leave that alone. I am not going to touch it at all. I'm going to put it right here on the side, and I'll leave it the same way it was. And now I got to take this M2 drive out. So I'll go ahead and remove this little screw here. It's got a little bit of thermal pad on it, but that's okay. Should come out cleanly. And there it is. You can see there's a little piece of thermal pad on the head of the screw. So I got to get that off of there so it doesn't get in my way. So now I can take the drive out and put this one aside. I will take the other one. Now it has a label on it. Now that label is going to interfere. So I'm going to see how easy it is to pull this label off. Theoretically, there's usually a sign on here that says you lose your warranty, but I don't want to lose my cooling either. Let's see how easily this comes off. I will save that. It's not going to go anywhere. So here's the new one. I took that off, so now the thermal pad should work a lot better. Let me put this one in here. Get those lands in there, right? Those lands have to go in here. You see the lands right here? They got to go in. You make sure you don't see them. And they have to disappear into the socket. Then we get the little M2 screw, put it back in, and we get it right down in here. We push down, push this down, and get it right in there. Nice and easy, just snug. Now the drive is in place. Now I can put this guy back in. It's got the captured screw here, right? Screw here that we have to put in. I'm not going to touch the thermal pad. I'm going to leave it just the way it is without dropping it. And get the first captured screw in. That should be it. Get my screwdriver. I'm not going to tighten it all the way down. I'm just going to get it going in there, like such. And then I'll put the other one in. And put that down into the other hole. And I can tighten it down snugly again, not too tight. Both sides. And there we go. She's in. Now let me fire her back up and she should automatically boot from that drive. Now, alternative to the method that I've shown here, you could actually get yourself an enclosure that connects through the USB 3.1 or 3.0. Or they also have available PCIe adapters where you can put an M2 drive on them and plug them right into one of your free ×4 PCIe slots. As it turns out, though, I was somewhat disappointed in the performance characteristics of the new 1 TB drive. It looks like I lost about 10% in read and gained maybe 20% in write. The read is the critical one as far as I'm concerned. The one I had in there was from a company called XPG, but it identified itself as an ADATA drive. They do have 1 TB versions of that, so I may look into that in the near future. Well, that concludes this video on upgrading this high-end AMD backup rig of mine to 1 TB of storage, at least on its M.2 drive. It has a secondary 1 TB and another 2.5-inch SSD, which I didn't touch. What'd you think of the technique that I used? Being able to put it right on the motherboard, because we had a spare one there handy. Put it right in. The copy was amazingly fast, don't you think? And also, it allows us some flexibility in the future. I can always put another SSD in there for even increased fast storage. So if you ever get a motherboard that has a second M.2 in it, that's a big plus. So anyway, until the next time, I hope you got something out of this video, and if you did, you'd at least consider subscribing to my channel. And that way in the future, when I'm doing future computer builds or upgrades or whatever related to computer technology, you'll be able to easily catch up with me on that. So until then, take care. And also stay safe, and in this world these days, do your best to stay healthy.